Morning world, it's the 3rd of June 2020, it's about 10:45 a.m. in the morning. I want to start off by giving a little homily. When I was a kid, young, single digits, I grew up in an environment where it was all white. I went to a school where there was maybe, in secondary school there was maybe, well, secondary school for those who aren't born in England, that means age sort of 11 to 15. In maybe 800 pupils, there were maybe a couple who were Asian and maybe a couple who were from the Caribbean, and that was it. So I grew up in a predominantly white environment. Racism just wasn't an issue because there were only white people. I didn't know anything different. Fast forward 15 years. I ended up through a completely different story, which I'm not going to go into now. But I ended up living in an island in the Caribbean called St. Martin in 1980 to 1982. I was there for 2 years. And I was with the mother of my child. And we lived in what was called the ghetto at the time. We were pretty much the only poor white family on the island. We lived in a place called Hameau de Pont on the French side of St. Martin. During our time there, I was subject to quite a lot of racism. I had flammable fluid poured over me and a couple of guys standing next to me with lighted cigarette lighters, and when that happens you really pay attention. And then our daughter was born, and she was the first white child born on that island for 50 years, and overnight all the abuse and the aggression stopped. And the people became so proud of us because we had a white baby on the island and we were not going off to have it in a rich hospital in America or somewhere like that. So I've encountered racism because of the colour of my skin directly and first hand. And the reason I'm saying this is because as a white man living in today's world, I'm first of all a man and a white man, and a white British man, one of the most despised species on the planet. Every white person has a kind of time in their lives where they ask themselves, well, am I racist? Now, I've asked myself constantly over the course of my life, or at least since the time I was in the Caribbean, which is way back sort of 40 years ago. And I know in my heart I have not a racist bone in my body. But it is, one of the things that's been going on in America is a number of white people on the marches going, white silence is a crime. And it's very easy for people who are not being threatened by what's going on in the world to just stay quiet and say nothing. And that's up to the individuals, of course. There's no right or wrong here. But from an astrological perspective, racism doesn't enter into it. A horoscope is a horoscope, regardless of colour of skin, of gender, of nationality, of ethnicity. Doesn't matter. But then we get to the horoscope of nations. You cannot determine the political stance of a nation from their horoscope. But the horoscope of a nation is very, very useful for timings. Now, the horoscope of America, and I am using the Sibley horoscope, and a vocal minority of astrologers suggest that the American Sibley horoscope is wrong, and they've emailed me consistently over the years, giving me a large number of different reasons as to why the horoscope for America is wrong. However, over a couple of centuries, this horoscope has become the most commonly used horoscope for America. Thus, it's become the horoscope of America. And it is still the most reliable tool for diagnosing what's happening in the US of A from an astrological perspective. If I use the Sibley chart of America, which is the 4th of July 1776 at 5:10 in the afternoon in Philadelphia, Then America's Sun is at 13 degrees of Cancer, square Saturn at 14 degrees of Libra. America's Ascendant is at 13 degrees of Gemini. In the last few days, in the sky, there's been a strong Sun square Mars at 11, then 12, now 13, tomorrow 14 degrees of Gemini and Pisces. And Venus is retrograde, conjuncting the Sun today and tomorrow at 13, 14 degrees of Gemini, on top of America's Ascendant. There is an partial eclipse of the full moon in a couple of days' time at 13, 14, 15 degrees of Sagittarius, opposite America's Ascendant, square Mars in the sky. With all of these squares to Mars in the sky, especially Mars in Pisces, which it doesn't really like being, it feels like it's just not being heard in Pisces. To me, this is a good analogy as to why there's been so much discord and aggression on the streets. It's not just because a black guy was illegally killed by white cops. This has happened many times before in America, and there's not been quite as big a demonstration or disorder as there has now. Because this new moon is opposite this full moon eclipse is opposite America's Ascendant now, this is to me the crowbarring open, the cracking of the eggshell. The next full moon, which will be at 13 degrees of Capricorn, is also a partial eclipse. This will be exactly opposite America's Sun and square America's Saturn. So it seems to me to have two partial eclipses of the full moon, one after the other, first one opposite America's Ascendant, the second one opposite America's Sun, suggests to me that the structure, the fibre, the nature of America is going through a fundamental change now, and it is pretty much irreversible. It is equivalent to an upgrade. Now, what would be really good is if there were people or a person who were able to give good, ethical, moral leadership, to be able to stand up and speak for all the people and guide the people in a way that most people would agree with. This unfortunately doesn't seem to be the case. At the moment, Pluto in the sky is opposite Donald Trump's Venus and Saturn conjunction, and will continue to be so until the end of this year, until early mid-November. This is suggesting that on the one hand that he's really going through a major transformation of value, and a lot of his personal structures and boundaries are being challenged and changed. Thing is, I see Pluto in a much more positive way than most other astrologers. I just don't see it as trauma and crisis. I also see it as transformation, rebirth and renewal. So there's every hope that he may have his Damascus moment. He was born with a strong square from Mercury in Cancer to Neptune in early Libra, which does give muddled thinking. But this year, all of this year, Uranus in the sky is sextiling Donald Trump's Mercury. So again, there's the opportunity here for him to be upgrading his mind and to be regenerating, transforming, rebirthing, coming up with new attitudes, ideas, opinions, beliefs, philosophies. Realistically, I think from his track record, the idea of Donald Trump having a catharsis and a Damascus moment and reshaping his ideas and opinions doesn't seem to hold water. But from an astrological perspective, I have hopes. Whether they're realistic or not is another matter. But the next 6 months, forget about the last 3.5 years of his presidency. The next 6 months will define his presidency. In fact, the next 6 weeks will define his presidency and the way he reacts and acts rather than reacts. Looking at the bigger picture, by the time we are into certainly August and Mars begins its 4.5-month long square to Jupiter and Saturn and Pluto, Mars in Aries, then there is going to be larger scale conflicts going on at various levels around the world. Hopefully not in terms of boots on the ground, rockets, missiles, guns. Probably more along the cyber and the political and the economic front. But Mars in Aries is not given to compromise and meeting people halfway. So I can't see there being a willingness to sit down and find common ground, at least not yet, not until November, December time. And no matter what I say about the American state or the American election, which is not that far away now, 5 months away, it's already kind of decided in people's eyes. People aren't going to be changing their minds in America how they're going to vote now unless something really dramatic happens, which is, no, I'm not ruling that out. Because you're either pro-Trump or you're not. And people aren't, there's very little middle ground left now to be argued over. It seems as if America is in some type of split. It's becoming dichotomized between the left and the right, and the centre ground is becoming increasingly a foreign land. And I cannot help but feel that if this were to continue, that there's going to have to be some type of rearrangement. Maybe some states will succeed. I don't think that Joe Biden is an acceptable alternative. He is a safe pair of hands. If Biden were to win the election, he would do nothing for 4 years, but he would bring an element of stability and doing nothingness into a country that actually needs a bit of stability. But if I were to be somewhat radical and suggest a brighter future, then perhaps America needs a dose of the divine feminine. And were Biden to somehow persuade Michelle Obama to run as his vice president, this could be something that would transform America. She is a Capricorn. She currently has Saturn and Jupiter on her sun. In a year and a half's time, Pluto will conjoin her sun. She could be a unifying force for America. I'm sure a lot of people would disagree with me on that. But from a global perspective, Trump wanted his wall around America. He's got it. It's not quite the way he wanted it, but he's got it because no one's going to America. All the borders are sealed. And America has been increasingly split between the haves and the have-nots. And it's not so much a question of race or colour. It's about intelligence. Because I come back to where I started. Racism of all types is perpetuated by people who are not intelligent. Once you start blaming someone else because of the colour of their skin or their religion or their belief systems, then you've lost your war. Time for individuals to speak out in a way that is assertive and projective without being confrontational and aggressive, and time for some ethical and moral leadership on this beleaguered planet of ours. Catch you later, world. Bye.